I finished all of the quilting on the main part of the design, and let's see if I can get a little of that in the picture. You can see how much of that there is. But around the edges of the quilt, I have to do some sort of a filling in that. And what I did is I started with I made a point in the very, and I marked a little spot in the very center of the quilt. Then I used a straight edge and marked lines from that center point all the way out to the edges. And so they're sort of radiating out from that. And I used my favorite marker is a Crayola Ultra washable marker, and they do wash out, and I always wash quilts when I finish them. I like that it softens them up, and it also shows me where any of my threads are going to come loose, and I can go back and fix those things. And I don't know, it just feels better to me after they're washed. Even though I always pre-wash my fabric, I wash them when they're done too. And particularly this one, since I used spray basting, I want to get some of that washed out as well. Anyway, so this will wash out. So I marked from that center point, used a straight line, I used a yardstick, and lines across. And now this is the quilting design that'll be the background. So it's just a matter of going up the line, and you can maybe see here I did a few that were a mistaken spot, so I had to move them. But anyway, so it's up the line and then just a series of arcs to create the design. So let's try and get back to the spot where you can see it, and we'll do a little stitching. I've still got this in my treadle, so that's the thump 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 sound you hear. So get my line, and of course this edge will be the outside edge will be covered in the binding, so I'm not too worried about that. I'll square that up and clean it up when I'm done. But the big problem for me always is that I'm not horribly accurate. If I could get the look I wanted without doing any marking at all, that would be my preference. But in this case, I at least marked the lines. Now these arcs are not going to be perfect. They're not going to be perfectly spaced because I'm just not that good, and I really didn't want to mark them all. So there'll be a little variation in these. But I think it'll be good enough, at least good enough for me. What I'm trying to do, at least, even though the spacing is not going to be exact and perfect, what I would like to be as accurate as I can is my stitch length. So I am trying to be fairly regular in my how fast I run the machine and how fast I move my hands, and that's what makes for even stitches. Unless you have a machine with a stitch regulator. And my stitch regulator is my my foot. And I just felt something weird happening here. Yeah, You see that? What happened is, I think, I didn't have my presser foot down. Sometimes when I'm doing this, because of the way that foot looks, I forget to, it's not the same as a piecing foot. You can tell when that's not lowered. But sometimes you look at this and you just can't tell. Let me see if I can show you that. So, if the needle is almost down, it looks as if that presser foot is down, but it isn't. And when the foot isn't down, you don't get the tension on the tension discs. And it did it again. So now it's time to look for the second problem, and here it is. Let me see if I can show you. You see what happened? See that? See the take-up arm there? The thread came out of it. So I need to rethread. So let me and I'm not sure exactly what made it come out, except that this is the kind that's got a slot in it so that it's easy to get in there, but sometimes it also jumps out, and that's what happened. The thread was bouncing a little bit as it came off the spool, and it just came out of the guide. So I'm going to rethread it, and I'll come back and show you some more. I wanted to show you again how my feet work, and I always do this barefoot. In the winter I wear socks, but I like to be able to feel it more. Now a lot of people will put both feet on the treadle. I don't. I keep my left foot behind me like that, so it's actually sort of under the chair. This foot on this particular machine, I put it pretty much in the middle, and let me, I got the machine rethreaded, so I should be able to do this. Let me just get it started, and you can watch what my feet do. If I can get the stupid thread to come off. Never seems to, okay, here we go. So, that's pretty much as fast as my foot ever has to go. And I just use one foot. There's a lot of people who think that I'm crazy, and oh, doesn't it cause you to have back problems or sore hips? Or no, it doesn't. It's to me the most comfortable way to do it, and I have ill effect of just using one foot. So that's how I do that. And you'll find the way that's most comfortable for you. And that may be using one foot, maybe using both, it may be using your left foot instead of your right. Find what works for you. For me, this is the most comfortable. So back up to the top here. Again, if I was real concerned about being perfect, I probably would have marked somehow and gotten absolutely accurate spacing on those arcs. It's just not my thing, and it's something I probably should work on, because when you're looking at a quilt that's been done on a regular old home machine or a treadle, and you're comparing it against some of the work that's done on a long arm machine, where they use a stitch regulator and rulers and marking tools of all description, they get some incredibly beautiful work, and some of it is just so accurate and precise that it just is kind of jaw-dropping. And you know, for this to compare, I'd have to be a little bit more careful, I think, and try to keep my spacing more consistent. I've got some areas where things are closer together than others, and you know, I don't know that it's creating an award-winning look when I'm just kind of winging it. But that's not to say that there's anything wrong with it this way. I think it's pretty. I'm happy with it. That's the important thing. And speaking of perfection and the desire for perfection, and sort of everything that goes into that, I enter a lot of my quilts in shows. Since 2012, I've had several, that was when I entered my first quilt in an AQS show. I think it was 2012, it might have been before that. Anyway, I've had a number of quilts that were accepted into AQS shows, and I won a couple of awards. I won one for the best hand workmanship, and I just won one for the best use of color. But when I make a quilt, I don't start out with the plan of making the perfect show quilt, because frankly, to me, that sucks out every bit of fun. When it's time to when the contest entry dates come around, I look at what quilts I have made that year, and I think and I read the contest guidelines, and I see if anything that I have fits the category. That's how I do a quilt for a show. It's not, I don't read the guidelines ahead of time and make a quilt specific for that show or for that category. I just see if I already have something that fits, and if I do, I enter it. That saves me from myself. For example, let's say I'm making this quilt, and I've already read the guidelines for the next show, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to enter this in wall quilts, home machine quilted. And then I would be thinking, oh, the spacing isn't right. I'm going to have to, make this perfect. I'll be measuring little segments. I'll be trying this and that to do this. And then I'll think, oh no, the judges will probably not think this is fancy enough. I better use a different technique here to make it more fancy, or more like something I've seen in a show before that did well. That's not, I can't work that way. I have to make something that's enjoyable to me, and if it fits the category and it gets accepted into a show, that's great. But I can't start out with the premise of I'm going to make a quilt for a show, I can't make myself be absolutely. It's just not my nature to say I have to make it perfect. Perfection is it's a nice goal, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't try to do well, but for me, the quest for perfection can really drain all the fun out of it and create a great deal of disappointment. If your expectation in the beginning is this has to be perfect for me to be happy, you're going to make a lot of quilts that you're not happy with. If you can make your goal be, I want this to be pretty, then you're going to make a lot of quilts that you're happy with. But if your definition of pretty is also perfect, you're gonna be disappointed a lot. So that's my thought on perfection. It's overrated, and the quest for perfection takes the fun out of it. Again, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive to do well, that you shouldn't try to do a nice job, but give yourself a break and take some of the pressure off. Perfection is not required for a quilt to be pretty. Okay, I'm going to quilt a whole bunch more of this, and then I'll show you what this background is going to do for the overall design. And then I'll do some binding, and I think based on the way this is looking, I'm thinking I'm just going to do a white binding on this one. So back in a bit. I had to stop and wind. I had to stop and wind some bobbins, and I thought I'd take a moment to tell you I do use this sliding mat underneath when I quilt, and the main reason is because it covers up the rough edges that sometimes catch on the quilt. And I do have to keep lifting it up to change my bobbin, but that's life. So that's a 15 class bobbin case, and bobbins that I just filled. They go in like that, and then there's a little groove in the side of the case that the thread goes up under, and then you give it a little tug until it goes under that part there, and then that goes inside, and you'll hear a little click on the hooks, and that brings the thread up. Now for the quilting, I don't know if you can see how far I've gotten. but this is what I'm working on, is this background, and I've lost track of time. I've lost track of how much thread I've used. It's a lot of both, but I'm making progress. One other thing I wanted to tell you about, though, as I'm maneuvering this quilt around, sometimes it hangs up on the edge of the machine, and what happened earlier today, as I was doing that, the quilt got caught in here. I got a couple of the threads from the side got hooked around this, and that's the check spring, and I yanked on it to pull it off, and I actually bent the spring and didn't realize that it was bent, and I fought with this machine for hours getting a few stitches done, and then it would skip stitches, and then it would bind up, and it kept I couldn't figure out what was wrong, and anyway, I finally got it back to what I think is the correct setting, and I'm back to being able to quilt without wanting to kill it, although it did seem to eat up a lot of time. I probably would have been finished if it hadn't been for the that little adventure. So one of the lessons here is be careful, and whenever your stitching is not coming out right, it's more than likely going to be in some way related to the tension. And in this case, because I bent the check spring that's part of the whole tension system, that's what was causing my problems. And I should have realized that. I kept rethreading. I thought, well, maybe I've got my bobbin case in wrong. I would rethread it. I changed my needle. But it was that little simple fix, and my stitching is coming out fine now. So live and learn. I am almost halfway on the background, and one of the things I found out, didn't realize, my backing fabric is shorter than my top, so I'm going to have to come back and trim to about here. So all of this on the edge is going to be extra that's cut off. But what I decided I'm going to do is I'm going to put the whole thing in the wash to get my markings out, get it cleaned up. Then I'm going to lay it out flat while it's still damp and get it to lay nice and flat. I'll let it dry that way. Then I'll come back and put the binding on. That'll make it lay a lot nicer. So I'm going to just quilt up to the edge as if this isn't a problem. After it's all done, I'll square it up with the rotary cutter and make it nice and pretty. But right now I'm just, I'm not worried too much about this outside edge because it's going to be cut off. The top was made with, the top and the back, it's just 1.5 yards of fabric, and that's all there is to it. 1.5 yards of fabric, top and bottom, and a lot of quilting. And I'm actually planning to trace out my pattern, do a little refining on the size, and make it into a PDF so that you could trace out your own. And I'll put it on my Etsy site for sale. This could also, this same design would also lend itself well to being done in applique. All these roses, instead of all this quilting to define them, this could be cut out and appliqued on. I'm doing another quilt in that style with the same pattern where I've appliqued this on, but I wanted to test it out both ways to see how it works. But I'll do that after it's all done, and I can get a better idea of what the whole thing looks like, so I can see if I need to make any other adjustments to the pattern itself. The only problem I see now is that it's a little big. This is the edge, and you see how close that comes to the edge. This is the selvage edge of the fabric. So I designed it to be with the fabric, but it comes really close to the edge. So I just want to shrink it down a little bit, so we've got a little bit more space when I do the pattern than what's here. But other than that, I think I'm liking the way it looks. You could quilt it in any number of different ways. You may not want to quilt the life out of it like I am, but anyway, that's my ultimate plan for the pattern. I'm going to finish up with this background quilting, and then I'll be back for a view of the finished top, or the finished quilt, before I wash and bind it. Well, there's the quilting finished. That took care of all the background. And now I'll do the throw it in the wash, get all the extra markings off. Then I will trim it, square it up, and get it bound. But that's the basic pattern there. I think it turned out pretty cool. So happy quilting.